Welcome! In this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain on the surprisingly complex system that decides what's on the shelf or what isn't when you go to buy something. Think of it as the hidden science of your shopping cart.
So here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll talk about the Goldilocks problem, something we've all run into. Then, we'll look at the great balancing act businesses have to pull off. After that, we'll get into the nitty-gritty. How much and when do they order? Then, a really smart strategy for dealing with the fact that not all stock is created equal. And finally, we'll put it all to a real-world test.
All right, first things first, let's dig into our first section, and you'll see how this whole thing starts with a frustration that's, well, incredibly familiar.
Have you ever wondered about this? You go to the store for that one thing you need, and of course, it's sold out. But right next to it, the shelves are just overflowing with other stuff. We've all been there, right? Staring at that empty space on the shelf. Well, it turns out it's not just bad luck. It's actually the result of a massive and super tricky business challenge.
You see, for any business, it's this constant battle. It's like walking a tightrope. On one side, if you have too little inventory, well, you're looking at lost sales, really unhappy customers, and sometimes you can even bring your entire production line to a screeching halt. But if you have too much, now your cash is just sitting in boxes, you're paying a ton for storage, and you're running the huge risk of things spoiling or just becoming totally outdated. It's a real dilemma.
So, how in the world do businesses find that sweet spot, that just right Goldilocks zone? Well, it all kicks off with understanding this really crucial trade-off between the costs and the benefits of just holding on to stuff.
But first, we kind of need to expand our definition of inventory. It's not just boxes on a shelf. In the world of operations management, inventory can be any stored resource waiting to be used. So that queue of people waiting for a teller at the bank, that's inventory. A stack of data files waiting to be processed by a computer? Yep, that's inventory too.
Okay, so on the pro side of the argument, holding inventory is like a company's safety net. It's a buffer for when demand suddenly spikes. It protects you if your supplier is late with a delivery. It even lets you buy in bigger batches to get those sweet bulk discounts. It's basically your shield against all the chaos and uncertainty of the real world. But of course, there's the other side of the coin. Every single item sitting in that warehouse comes with a hidden price tag. You've got holding costs. That's the money tied up in the stock itself, plus the cost of the warehouse space, insurance, you name it. Then there are ordering costs, all the admin and shipping fees every time you need to restock. And maybe the biggest one, shortage costs. That's the money you lose from a missed sale. And, maybe even worse, the damage to your reputation when a customer can't get what they came for.
And that really gets to the heart of it. The whole game, the entire goal of inventory management is to master this balancing act. You have to provide enough resources to meet demand, to keep everyone happy, while at the same time minimizing all those costs we just talked about. That's the challenge.
Okay, so we get the conflict now, right? It's a constant push and pull. So let's get practical. Let's look at the two big questions every manager needs to answer to actually solve this puzzle, and the tools they have in their toolkit to do it.
Honestly, it all boils down to just two things. First, how much should we order? And second, when should we order it? Simple questions, right? But finding the right answers is the key to everything. And luckily, we're not just guessing. There are some really smart models to help us out. And this visual here is a fantastic way to understand the answer to that first question, how much? This is a classic chart that shows something called the economic order quantity, or EOQ. See that orange dotted line? That's the cost of holding inventory. The more you have, the more it costs. Now look at the yellow dotted line. That's the cost of ordering. The more you order at once, the fewer orders you place, so that cost goes down. The EOQ is that magic number right there at the very bottom of the total cost curve, that solid red line, where those two opposing costs find their perfect, cheapest balance. That's your sweet spot. So once the EOQ tells you how much to order, the next piece of the puzzle is when. That's where the reorder level, or ROL, comes in. Think of it as a trigger point. It's based on how much you expect to sell while you're waiting for that new shipment to arrive. And this is super important. It includes a little extra buffer, something called safety stock, just in case there's a surprise delay or a sudden rush of customers.
Okay, but let's be realistic. Imagine trying to calculate a perfect EOQ and reorder level for every single nut, bolt, and smartphone in a massive warehouse. It would be an absolute nightmare. It's just not practical. So businesses have to be smart about it. They have to work smarter, not just harder.
And this is where a super powerful concept called the Pareto Principle saves the day. You probably heard of it as the 80-20 rule. When it comes to inventory, it basically says that roughly 80% of your inventory's total dollar value comes from just 20% of your items. And this idea leads to a really clever strategy known as ABC analysis.
And this chart here just lays it out perfectly.
Businesses will literally group their stock into 3 categories. You've got your A items. These are the superstars, the vital few. They might only make up, say, 20% of your actual products, but they account for a whopping 80% of the money you have tied up in stock. Then, all the way at the other end, you have your C items, the trivial many. This could be half of your different products, but they're only worth maybe 5% of your total inventory value.
So what do you do with this information? You treat them differently. It makes perfect sense. For your high-value A items, you use the tightest possible controls. You're monitoring them constantly, maybe even daily, and you keep very little extra safety stock because it's so expensive to hold. But for the cheap and cheerful C items, think screws, paper clips, that kind of thing, you use the simplest system possible. Maybe you check the bin once a month and you keep tons on hand because who cares? It's cheap. It's all about focusing your time and energy where it has the biggest financial impact.
Now, all these formulas and strategies look fantastic on a whiteboard. They're clean, they're logical, but what happens when these tidy theories crash into the messy, complicated, and totally unpredictable real world?
Well, if you take a place like Southern Africa, for example, those textbook models get a major reality check. Things that might be predictable elsewhere suddenly become huge question marks. You've got ports that get congested, which means you need way more safety stock to cover potential delays. Transportation costs are high, so you're pushed to place bigger, less frequent orders. You have power cuts, load shedding, which can ruin temperature-sensitive goods or just shut down your production lines. All these local challenges completely change the math and force businesses to adapt. And a lot of the time, that means holding way more inventory than the formulas would suggest, just to stay in business.
So I think the big takeaway here is that behind every single item you see on a shelf, there's this invisible engine working away. It's this incredibly complex web of predictions, of financial trade-offs, and clever strategies, all designed to navigate a world that is anything but certain.
And that kind of leaves us with a final question to think about. The next time you see that empty shelf, will you just see it as a simple mistake, or will you see it for what it really is? The result of a super high-stakes balancing act that, for just a moment, went wrong.